Hi, everybody. Coach Anna here. And today I have the absolute pleasure and honor of having my friend Sande Roberts join us. Sande is a suicide prevention consultant, and she has been working in the field for over 30 years, primarily with teenagers. And I think this is a very timely topic to be discussing because I'm sure Sande can fill us in because I have a huge question for her. Like, what has the increase, what has COVID done to suicide rates? I think that, one of the topics that we're going to talk about is addiction and suicide, because you guys know that's my jam. And I think that both of these topics are very taboo and very, ooh, let's not talk about suicide. Let's not talk about addiction, because there's so much like shame and guilt attached to these things. And guys, that is not okay. Don't let that be okay. It's kind of like when a sex abuse victim, it's okay. We don't want to talk about it. Instead of saying, I'm sorry that happened to you. If someone got in a car wreck or something happened to them that wasn't their fault, we would say, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. And we would face it. But there's certain things we don't want to face as a society. And what I'm hoping is that Sande can help us feel much more comfortable having a conversation with our teens, with our people in our community that we love, and that we can be part of the solution in preventing suicide. So I give you Sande Roberts. Tell us what you do, why you do it.
Okay, here I am. Thank you so much for having me on your show. I really appreciate it, and I've been looking forward to it. Oh my goodness, suicide. Yes, regarding the current suicide situation, there is a huge spike for all the dozens of reasons. And actually, I'm going to give you 14 reasons that people do attempt suicide. One of the things that I want to really say about suicide is it's like emotional flu.
Mm.
And that, so, digest that for a moment.
I absolutely love that. I can actually say that I look at addiction the same way. You have an illness and then you
Yes,
have symptoms, and the symptoms can be different for everyone.
they are. Yeah, you can bunch some of them, but in the larger picture, you really can't. And that, so as emotional flu, and that one of the things that I've noticed over these years is when we're sick, we go to the clinic or the doctor. The doctor says, oh no, you have, bad elbow or bad knee, or, or, whatever you have that's not working, and that. And then they run tests, and that you may go have surgery. And that if you have surgery, you have, like you prepare at the doctor's office, you go to the hospital, they do intake, you have your surgery, you go to pre-op, you go into the operating room, you go into post-op, you go into another stage of a waiting room, and then you may go to a room or home, that depending on the type of surgery. And then you go for follow-up. In suicide, they just tell you, you shouldn't think that way.
I think that it's getting harder and harder to treat addiction as well. You know,
Yeah.
you should
Yes.
be able to stop anytime you want to.
Mhm.
It's the same kind of stigma goes hand in hand, I think, with these harder topics
Oh,
and
it does. It really does.
funding, because there's not a pill, there's not a medication, so there's no reason for big companies to spend a lot of money on research for mental health either, because a lot
Mhm.
of it is cognitive therapy, and that's incredibly expensive. Group therapy, the treatment modalities aren't money makers.
Right, right. And I do have some very dear friends who are therapists, in private practice. One of them that I love to send people to does equine therapy, and that with a horse, and that it's wonderful. Another one that actually we worked together handling child protective service cases for several years. And she's in private practice now, and I love sending people to her, especially children or families, because she and her husband are in practice, and so they can work with it. It's a great combination. Um, and I teach it. Let me rewind that. This shows anybody can mess up even when they're on like this. Um, So I send people to her and her husband because they're able to pass it around, and he's an addiction specialist. And so it just works. Um, you know, I have a grandson who was adopted from a Romanian orphanage, and that he's in his 20s, late 20s now. And he has two addictions. He has a sex addiction and he has a substance addiction. And he's had that since high school.
How old
And
was he when he was adopted?
he was 2.5.
So
And
he may have
that's a
active
huge,
attachment disorder as well.
yes, he does. He absolutely has an attachment disorder. And once he discovered sex and drugs, it was kind of the beginning of a very, very horrendous path. He has done every program, he has done everything you can think of, and he still struggles. And so he's living in California now, and he's doing better with some of the resources there, but it's really a shame. And the ultimate bottom line shame of it is he has twin girls that he doesn't get to see,
Right. And
and
it
that's
can rob
painful.
us of all
Mhm,
the true pleasures of life because it attacks our dopamine reward center and
mhm.
rewires our brain and our thinking. And
Yeah.
I think that suicide ideology stems from some all or nothing addictive type thinking. And I
Mhm,
also believe that the primary and first drug, the gateway drug, is sugar. And a lot of babies
mhm.
that are not breastfed are immediately introduced to hyper palatable sugars
We
like
have a guest.
hello, like corn syrup and that kind of thing in the bottle, and then people feed their kids an abnormal amount of sweets now, and the school systems are allowed to feed kids Pop
Right.
Tarts and say that they're healthy whole grains. Well, this is um,
Mhm.
attacking the reward center and the brain's dopamine center, which causes our frontal lobe to disengage because this is loud back here, this primal area that
Mhm.
wants survival and also our sense of belonging. Like our families are more divided. We used to be in more of a tribe even 100 years ago. We didn't move that far away from our grandparents or great grandparents, and we had a community and a tribe that mattered.
Mhm.
That kind of social system is really important in suicide prevention as well as addiction recovery. And so I think there's just so many things in common. So can you tell us these 14 things and
I
what you
do,
think are the
yeah.
important structures and ways to go about having someone get help? And we may be doing a series of interviews, so don't worry if you don't get it all out, because I personally think this is an incredibly important topic. And if it helps one person, I'm more than willing to, have many and hopefully maybe alive someday where we can take questions.
That would be wonderful. So I see 14 lead-ins to wanting to contemplating suicide, and hopefully not actually moving forward with it. So one of them is, and these are not in a specific order, and they're all number one. and that So post-traumatic stress disorder, we hear about that. If you've been traumatized, it doesn't matter how you were traumatized. Trauma is trauma, and that it messes up your system. I'm going to let you do all the fancy words. I'm with it messes up your system.
Right?
It and people don't really realize that they don't have to be, beaten to the ground or what have you, and to be traumatized. You can be traumatized seeing somebody else being traumatized.
Yes.
Yeah, so there's a wonderful sharing of the effects of trauma. Yeah. And so you have, it can include, an assault, an accident, domestic abuse, a natural disaster, someone spending time in prison, rape, terrorism, traumatic brain injury, uh, you know, all these things that we're going through right now are absolutely positively traumatizing. That personal relationships, that is so high on the list of reasons people break up and then think oh no, I'm not worthy, they left me, or I left them, I feel guilty. One of the worst ones was I did spend a year with a crisis center, and that way early on, and I had a 6-year-old boy who had said that he wanted to commit suicide. And when I asked him why, and that what purpose would it serve, and that he said, well, my parents are getting a divorce. I saw something that showed me that if I'm not here, then they have to get together and talk about it. And then when we get together as a family again to talk about this, and that they'll back together and we'll be a happy family again.
Right, and a 6-year-old has no concept of the
Nope.
permanence of death, and
Mhm.
so that makes complete sense. And I also think that this goes again to the whole connection thing. We
Mhm.
need to be in a tribe, and we need to have people that we're secure with, you know?
Yes.
We're meant to be interdependent, not codependent or independent. Both independence and codependence are kind of like they're a little off from what we really want to be. I help you, you help me. We're able to give and receive help
Mhm.
and share our resources, and that's how we've survived as a human race. And
Oh, absolutely.
now we're so kind of compartmentalized and separate, and I mean, thank God for Zoom now, you know,
Oh, yes. Mhm. Yeah,
but
I'm
some
teaching 3
people, this
classes
is
on
the way
Zoom.
they've been relating for a long time. This hasn't been that unusual for our teen population, for instance, because they communicate by Snapchat. They do this and that instead of putting down their phones and being like together like we were accustomed to.
Mhm. Right, and which is a little more challenging in a literal classroom. Here, I am so grateful for the little chat column, because I have right now I'm teaching a high school class. I'm teaching college psychology for a high school class, and then I'm teaching it at the community college. And so a couple of my classes are on Zoom, and I say, okay, go put that in the chat. And that if you can't answer or you don't know what to say, just go put it in the chat. Or I'll, put them into breakout rooms or things so that they can talk about stuff. But and because they're psychology classes, we talk about crisis, we talk about suicide, and that that's not necessarily something that someone gives a lot of time to, and that even though it's psychology and they really need to. So I'm going to go back to like personal relationships, and that because rejection, it's like, get out, I don't want you anymore. I have a newer model, and that's going to send someone, I'm no good, I'm not worthy, no one will ever love me. And that definitely high up there, on the suicide, pick
So
this for
we're really talking about worthlessness as the underlying
absolutely.
issue and not understanding your value.
Mhm.
And that starts before the relationship.
Yes.
And the relationship is again part of that addiction because we're talking about codependency here. So
Mhm.
here's addiction again, rearing its ugly head when we're addicted to the outcome. If this and that happens, then, this emergency happens. When you're okay with yourself, if someone wants to leave you, sure, it hurts, but you're not going to be defined by that exit of that person from your life. And so it's so interesting to me because the more you talk, the more I can see all of these dots connected.
Oh, they really do. That's why I'm so delighted that you asked me to be on your show. And um, one young man one time said to me, and that, what do I do when my girlfriend says, I have my hand on the car door. Would you care? Would it matter to you if I opened it and fell out and got run over? Now, first off, I just want to smack them both. That is like, just come over here, whack, pay attention. But this was real. This was her insecurity, and it goes both ways of, would you still love me if, I'm not getting enough attention. I need you to do something that shows me that you still care, and that.
And
So
that's an addiction as well. And that's again
yes, yes.
codependency
Mhm,
and the root
mhm.
cause, I think goes back to your brain being rewired for very intense reward. You know,
Mhm.
I know that sometimes women getting out of a relationship where they've behaved that way, they've been the woman that's ran out in the street and stopped the car, please don't leave me, you know, and gotten in front of the moving car with their
Right.
dramatic boyfriend who's not even worth being with. But they
Mhm.
have to have him, but they don't really want him. They just can't do without him. It's kind of like we say, you know, you can't live with or without the use of drugs, or you can't live with or without eating that food. And I
Mhm.
think that this is the same kind of thing. And you just have these behaviors that are hardwired into you. I bet that girl was thinking, I shouldn't do this, but
Mhm.
she did it anyway. And it's a big form of manipulation and getting what you
Oh,
trying to get
bing
what you want.
bingo, bingo, manipulation.
And we want that outcome. We want that person to say, I will never leave you, but they have to like write it in their own blood or something. And even then,
Mhm.
because it's an addiction,
They
it's not
keep
gonna be
checking.
enough for her.
Mhm.
So no
Yeah.
matter what he does, it isn't going to be enough for her because the disease of addiction is more different, better. And that's whether you're addicted to an outcome in a relationship or
Mhm.
whatever it is. The disease will never be satisfied. Dis-ease. That's why we say disease, right? And
Absolutely.
I just want to backtrack real quick because you were talking about, you know, suicide and how the difference between medical treatment for an illness that we consider an illness.
Right.
And I always think like cancer, you wouldn't just be like, you don't just go to the doctor and hear you have cancer and not do anything. You know,
Right.
some people might if their body is riddled with it, and that's probably a wise decision for them in that instance. But most people are going to want to know, what can I do to improve my chance at stock? You
Right.
know? And so because there's no shame or guilt associated with having cancer,
Mhm.
but there's shame and guilt associated with going to your doctor and saying, I want to hurt myself. You
If
know,
there's anything wrong with you from here up, or actually from here up and that up here, and that, then there's shame and guilt with it. Everything else mechanically about our body and everything else is fine. I mean, we're still light years behind in our emotions, in our brain, in our thinking, in our process.
and our brain is chemically driven.
Yeah.
It is physiological.
Mhm.
And we have physiological things that can cause us to feel suicidal, you know, to feel a low energy. You know, going to your doctor and saying, I feel depressed, maybe you find out, oh, I have autoimmune disease. You know, you get the autoimmune disease treated and the depression clears up. Or maybe you have postpartum, or maybe you have some other underlying medical condition that's making you think certain way too. So nobody should be ashamed or afraid to seek medical attention or treatment
Mhm.
for suicide. And there are things you can do that you don't even have to go to the doctor. You can call a suicide hotline. I'm sure Sandy will provide us with resources.
I will. Yeah. In fact, what I will do is I'm going to send you a handout that you can make available to everyone. And that,
Perfect.
or you can go to my website and get it. And that. Workplace. Workplace relationships are personal relationships also. And, you know, it's like there's a very high degree of suicide in military, police, fire, sports. And in fact, I have done several talks on military, police, fire, and football, and the comparisons of the reasons why they're kind of in the same boat with contemplating suicide. So it's pretty interesting. And you know, as far as the gossip line or the how to make you feel bad line, you know, workplace can be a very, very bad thing. And I've always wanted there to be like the ticker tape, you know, that runs around that tells you all the stocks and the prices and stuff like that. Every school and every office needs one of those. Yes, Betsy and Bob are no longer speaking. Sarah is like so hot and available. Jim is paying alimony for the 3 kids, but now Sarah's pregnant by him. You know, there's kind of a line that goes around that we share, that we're always looking for something that's not working for someone else so we can feel better. And you know, that we no, we need to not do that. Money and that. Um, it doesn't matter if you're Rockefeller, there's never enough. There's always something that has just one more zero on it that you want, that, oh no, now I need to do something to get that one more zero tacked on so that I can get it. Um, Too much overindulgence, too little embarrassed. They just go hand in hand with reasons why people contemplate suicide.
Again,
Family,
addiction process.
another addiction, yes, family. Um, some people have no family, some people have too much family, some people have family who will keep their noses out of stuff. And I think there's a commercial on TV now where they have aunts, and the aunts are people who come in and tell them what to do. I love that. And that's like, yeah, hello, this is like, suicide prevention. Stress, just real, I mean, who isn't stressed right now?
Including good stress, don't you
Yeah.
think?
Oh,
Sometimes I
yeah.
think the most surprising suicide is that one where, oh my God, they had everything going for them. Like, let's take, for instance, the actor Robin Williams,
Yeah, Robin, yes.
right?
Oh
I
my
mean,
God,
he
I know.
actually went and opened up his home group AA meeting and served coffee at
Mhm,
that meeting that morning. He was in recovery. He was carrying a message, and
mhm.
he had some physical issues, they think, going on that was attacking his brain. And maybe he was aware of it, and maybe he wasn't. Maybe he just had such deep-seated shame. I could imagine the inner dialogue going something like, I've been in recovery all these years. I should feel better than this, because this back here will guilt and shame you. If you hear that voice inside of your head telling you you're less than because you're thinking life's not worth living, maybe you should just think about, instead of saying, be more curious about it, be like, why am I thinking life's not worth living?
Yeah,
Maybe I should find out, why these thoughts are going through my head, and give yourself permission to find the plethora of wonderful people that are out there ready and willing to help you.
yes, for sure. And then, which leads right into drinking and drugs. And that, I mean, we have that as our balloon. And uh it doesn't necessarily cause suicidal thought, but what it does is it triggers, as you're saying, the I'm not good enough, I'm not, I'm not thin enough, I'm not big enough, I'm not high enough, I'm not short enough, and so the not enoughs, And the other thing with especially alcohol is you take that first sip. Oh my gosh, that just feels so good. Now you want to maintain that. You don't get that first sip again. you
Right.
know, Only when you're sober.
That's the whole thing. The disease of addiction is trying to find that. It's called euphoric recall. That's what
Mhm,
it's called. And the
mhm,
reason that we say that sugar is the gateway drug is because your first rewiring of the brain and neurons that fire together, wire together, is that first, like, ice cream cone. And there's a great video on on YouTube where this little girl has her first bite of ice cream. She's like, not maybe a year old. And
mhm,
she's like, it's nothing to her because she's never seen it before. And she takes a taste and she grabs the cold ice cream and shoves it into her face. And you can see the 4th of July going off back here, right? So
mhm.
we know that she just hardwired her brain for that reward. And
Oh,
now
yeah.
forever,
Mhm,
she's going to look for that
mhm,
fireworks going off of that
mhm.
hyper palatable food or that whatever it was. And so now she's more prone to be a drug addict or have other outlets, because it's one disease, many outlets. And most
Oh,
people
yeah.
have way more than one outlet when they're addict. Like you spoke about your grandson, he has more than one outlet.
Oh, yeah. And to this day, he still hides food under the bed. And at the orphanage, they would start at one end. They'd have all the young ones in a line, and they would give them, like, a bowl of slop,
Yeah.
and then they would circle back around and pick up the bowls. So if you hadn't eaten it by the time they come back to get the bowl, they take it anyway. So he learned to chipmunk his food, and that he would stuff it in his cheeks so that he still had all the food. And that, but he still has food issues, and that he's in his 30s, and he still has food issues. And, this chipmunking and the fear of never having another meal and not having enough and everything else
Well,
that goes with
fear.
that.
That's
Mhm,
an excellent word. We fear,
mhm.
and fear is false evidence appearing real.
Oh, I
So
like that.
even though he was provided for once he got here, his
Mhm,
euphoric recall told him, no, I'm never going to have enough. I have to do certain things. And while these habits that he got into, or these addictive behaviors, they served him well. He
oh,
survived
yeah,
because
it
he
does. Mhm,
did these things,
mhm,
but he doesn't see that, I don't have to do these things anymore. And that's why an admission
mhm.
of, hey, you know what, I'm powerless over what happened to me. I'm powerless over addiction, which is obsession and compulsion. And that's what he's doing. He's being obsessive and compulsive. You know,
Mhm,
this is part of the brain getting hijacked when he was a kid by that trauma, and by
mhm.
that not being safe. I had a cousin who he went to South America and helped at an orphanage, and he said the babies were so good there, none of them ever cried. And I went, what? I
Yeah,
said, let me tell you why they didn't cry. As a mother, I know they didn't cry because nobody was going to come, and they
yeah,
learned to stop crying because it wouldn't matter if they cried.
work.
They could
Mhm,
cry all night
mhm,
because nobody's going to come and get them.
mm,
And that's where you get that reactive attachment disorder,
mhm.
where, yeah, so it's hard for people with that to reach out for help.
Oh,
So you
definitely.
almost have to, like,
Mhm.
be an observer of yourself and be like, okay, maybe more things are going on here, and there is hope. That's what I hope me and Sandy, that's what we really want to bring to you guys, is there's hope. Don't just get depressed about this.
Absolutely.
There are actions you can take.
Mhm.
So anyway, we
Absolutely.
could go on all day on the
Oh, I
sidetrack
know.
stuff. Let me let you get back to the 14.
Okay. And, anger and bullying. Uh, if I mean, either self-inflicted anger at yourself, anger at situations, other people, everything that isn't fair, and it just, it leads to unbearable pain, loss, and grief, which is another one. So many people want to join someone that has passed away, and that by ending their life to go be with them. And that's so sad and tragic. And that to,
The Romeo and Juliet style.
yeah, yes, 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 yes. I'm gonna end my life too, and now I'll be with you. And that's, sometimes it's sickness that takes a life, and the person says, I can't live without them. Uh, During those times, we're in a mental fog, and until the fog lifts, we can't and shouldn't be making decisions for that. Let's see. So we have that, we talked about the medical and mental, we talked about the time frame that goes across those decisions and that. So let's talk about self-esteem. It's like, who am I? Am I worthy? Is this okay? Am I am I getting what I should be getting? Am I not getting what I shouldn't be getting? Are they mixed up? Mhm. And we have moral injury. Now, when our definition of what's right is violated, and we have so many situations with military, police, fire. We have so many situations in almost every walk of life of I have to do something. I have to do something that may hurt one person to save 20.
Right. And that feels like it's going so against your values. And
Absolutely.
like you were playing God.
Yeah, it really is. And that's really the hardest issue that we have, in that mode of, something happened, I could only do this in order to save.
I would put nurses and doctors in that
Absolutely.
category as well. I was a nurse when AIDS was a death sentence.
Oh,
And
yes.
we lost over 9 people within 3 months, and the youngest was 19 and the oldest was 42. And not only was that traumatic for us because we were powerless, but we
Yeah.
watched as only one of those people had family support, because it was, it was the plague. It was, it was the moral issues involved with it. You were a junkie or you were a homosexual, which
Yes, we lived in the San Francisco area for quite a few years. And one young man that I had met, we actually worked together for a little while, and that before he took the job, his partner had died of AIDS. And the irony was 6 weeks after his partner died of AIDS, he won $100,000 in the lottery. And he was so upset that, like, well, why couldn't this have happened before? Or, why did this have to happen? Maybe this would have helped save him, everything that you go through. And that I always show my students, was a movie, oh, I can't even see the title, and that where he has AIDS and he's
oh,
part,
um,
yeah, I know. I know, I know, and that McConaughey is in it.
yes,
Um, yeah,
the,
and
the
that,
the fighter club, the something club.
yes, 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 yes. Yeah,
That movie was so well done.
yes. I show that every
So
semester to my.
powerful. I think that, we want to turn our eyes away. And I grew up in San Francisco, and
Oh,
now
okay.
the Tenderloin District is everywhere.
Uh-huh.
I grew up watching junkies shoot up. We would be driving by, and there they were in the doorways. I remember my brother Dino saying, "Look at the junkies doing their junk." And I think that kids need to be innocent but not naive. And when I say that, I think that at a very young age, we should start talking about diseases like addiction. We should
Mhm.
start talking about boundaries, because one of the things that we're talking about, like with this girl who wants to put her hand on the door, will you love me? How much do you love me? If I go to open the store, what are you going to do about it? This is like, this girl never had any boundaries. She probably couldn't
Right.
take no for an answer and didn't get to say no. These are things that we can teach our kids young. One thing I did with my youngest child that I didn't do with my oldest two, because there's a 20-year difference and I learned more, was I didn't make Lisa let everybody play with all of her toys. She was allowed to say no. But by
Mhm.
the same token, she knew that other kids were allowed to say no too. And you don't get to throw a fit. Mom, they won't share. Like, sharing
Mhm.
everything you have is some kind of big moral deal,
Oh, right. Mhm.
we don't have to share everything we've got. I don't have to tell you everything about myself.
Mhm.
I have to me, a boundary is like a crib for a baby. You put up that side rail. Why? To protect that infant that's in the crib. If you have a healthy boundary, you are literally protecting yourself from others, and you're protecting others from yourself as well. It's a
Yeah.
kind thing to do. It's not a mean, horrible, selfish thing to do, but we don't teach our kids to do this.
Right. We teach them to share everything. It's like, hey, I take this. It makes me feel really good. You want some? Because I love you, so I'm going to share it with you.
And a lot of parents infringe on their kids' personal rights. They don't even knock on their bedroom door. They take their phone and start looking through it, even though the child may have not given them any cause to worry.
Mhm.
My daughter knows that if I think she's holding back something from me, I'm going to ask. And if I'm still not satisfied, then I'll let her know, I want to look at your phone, you know.
Mhm.
But I haven't had to do that, because she knows she can tell me everything and I don't react, because I see her as an individual, not
Mhm.
as somebody who reflects on who I am. If she's 16, if she does something stupid, that's on her. She's going to be 17 in March.
Mhm.
She can make choices of her own, and I put the responsibility on her. And that helps me stay separate enough from her that I don't feel like if she makes a mistake, or if she, does something embarrassing, it's her embarrassment, not mine.
Mhm.
And I think
Right.
that that's, something like we need to learn as a society, how to be a parent that's available and help in a healthy way, detached from our kids' journey.
One of the things that I always say is, if you have teenagers, when you get to a point where something is difficult, trade them 3 families to the left. And that you'll get somebody else's teenager who will recognize and tell everyone that you're like the coolest adult they ever met. And yours gets to go somewhere where they're with the coolest adult they ever met. And it's like, okay, if you can't just deal with it, 3 families, just shift 1, 2, 3, you know. and that. Hopelessness. So many people are, you know, and at this point in everything that's happening with COVID, and that depression and shame and hopeless and worry and
Yeah.
fears and everything. It's so easy to see why somebody would, you know, pick up the bottle and want to just, you know, drown it out, or, you know, drugs, or, you know, just, you know, like, give me a day not having to think about this. That it's so easy to understand, and that even if it's so dangerous and just takes everything else out, and that, and being in a situation where the people in charge are authoritarian, and that, and they're not helping, and that they're saying, you go do this and you go do that and that, but they're not helping. And they're, you know, it could be a family member, it could be, you know, a teacher, it could be a boss, a caretaker. You know, certainly in the military, it's 100% authoritarian.
Yes. And I think too, I mean, look for red flags. If you are seeking help and someone says, well, you should do this, you just need to do this and that, go talk
Yeah.
to someone else.
Yes, yes. Do not take anything from the person who tells you it has to be a certain way. And so I work with a lot of like police departments and fire departments and military organizations, and that whole authoritarian piece of, you know, and sometimes a person could be in a situation where, you know, perhaps they are jeopardizing their safety for some decisions that they're making, but they're so used to having to get an order from someone else that they hesitate, and, you know, and may be injured in that time frame while they're hesitating, because they're unable to make a decision without somebody telling them what to do, and they could get in trouble for making a decision without somebody telling them what to do. So it really gets, yeah, it gets so challenging. But there's hope. There really is hope. But what I want to do, I just want to tell you, well, there's a couple of things. So hospitalization, and that, it's not therapy. Hospitalization is the physical part to make sure that your body's working so that you can deal with everything that's happening.
It's the
Um,
emergency
I had,
room.
I had knee replacement surgery like last summer, not this immediate past summer, but the summer before, and that. And, you know, so it was, you know, you go in, you're, you know, back to that, the stages and that you're in, and you know that you're going to be uncomfortable for a little while. And I was in the little grand, you know, with the walker and the tennis balls. But just hospitalization, you know, in a mental hospital is the same, in that we put such a stigma on the brain. You know, please stop taking the stigma off the brain.
Right.
And
It is the brain. It is an organ.
yeah,
If your heart, you know, my
yeah,
husband's a cardiologist. People go to him because
yeah,
our heart is sick. If
exactly.
my brain has a disease, why don't I want to go and talk to somebody who deals with brains?
Exactly.
A psychotherapist, a psychologist, a psychiatrist, a counselor, an addiction specialist, somebody who understands that the brain has a capacity for healing as well. And, you know, for me, I think that healing needs to be holistic. We give our brain an assault by what we put in our mouth as well, you know, because say, for instance, like early onset Alzheimer's, people start feeling shame and guilt around that. Their
Mhm.
brain isn't working right. That anger comes out. They're angry because they don't understand what's happening, and they're trying to cover up because of the shame and guilt what they can't remember. You know, and
Mhm.
that's called type 3 diabetes, meaning your brain no longer can use glucose as its primary fuel.
Mhm.
So, you know, I think mental health and deep ketosis, kind of, they're showing a lot of where this can be therapeutic in and of itself, and learning for your body to become a fat burner and learn to burn fat for fuel is very brain healing and
Mhm.
very therapeutic. It's used for Parkinson's, it's used for Alzheimer's, it's used for um, children for years with seizures, and it's more effective than medication
Mhm.
for children with seizures.
Wow.
And that's pretty fascinating. And I'll probably have Dr. Georgia Eid on at some point. I took a class with her, and she's a psychiatrist who helps people find out what food triggers are causing their brain to not function at its optimal
Mhm.
function. And so uh, our body is a chemical reaction factory, and so we can't just eat. A lot of Americans were overfed and undernourished, whether we're thin or fat. It doesn't matter what size, but we eat a lot of empty, devoid of nutrition, things that are inflammatory, and that inflammation is going to extend to our brain. So a lot of what's happening with your thinking, it could literally be inflammation, you guys. Like,
Yeah.
make no mistake about it. In fact, when you were talking about football players and military and all these people and what they have in common, how many football players have killed themselves because of traumatic brain injury, because of concussions from when they were in high school?
And we
And
actually need to be grateful that, that they actually did some looking into that and figured out so much that is saving lives.
and so we can't see the damage in our brain necessarily, you know. But it is an organ, and it's not. I just implore you to not think that suicide is your fault, and that it's your fault that you want to hurt yourself. There's nothing to be ashamed of, and there is help and there is hope. I'm actually a person that has been directly impacted by suicide, and I also have been suicidal before, and it started when I was 14, and it was first that attention, will anybody care if I'm dead? And then it was the hopelessness, and that was I had 9 years clean, and I was doing the laundry, and I thought, boy, it sounds good to just slip my wrists. And there was a sense of relief to have the life, to visualize the life running out of me. Fortunately, I knew how to tell on my disease after 9 years of being clean. And so I immediately said to myself, why am I got curious. What the heck? I'm just standing here doing the laundry. Why is this thought coming to me? And so I let a couple of people I trusted know what I was thinking, and I got help. And it changed my life.
Very important, very important. And that we're so afraid to let somebody know. When I was the year that I spent with a crisis center, uh, obviously taking hotline calls and everything else, but when I would go out to schools all in the up and down the whole peninsula in south of San Francisco, and I would talk to a class, and I would go like 2 days in a row so that I would see them again the following day. And I got such hopefulness in some ways and such sadness in others. But I would have what I would end up having would be like a line of students that when we would take a break, they would like line up to tell me about their experiences. And everything from, oh, I'm so glad you came and talked today because I was really seriously thinking about this, to, um, why I was thinking this way.
There's some kind of scratchy noise. I'm sorry.
Okay, I think I did that. That wasn't the cat. um, anyway, it was a matter of being able to talk to someone, and they were shocked that they could tell someone that. And at a certain point, I would have the teacher stand in the back of the room, and I would ask the students to raise their hand, what's their stress level, on a 10 scale, if it's 1, 2, that. And anyone who was above like a 5, the teacher would connect them with resources at the school to make sure, that they had someone to talk to. And as part of the crisis outreach team, I would, end up going to schools or going to, all kinds of weird places, and that to do assessments and to see if somebody needed help. And I have been cursed out so many times, for putting someone in the hospital, and I just kind of smile and I just kind of go, yeah, I'm so glad that you're still alive, and really yelling at me at that.
It's
Um,
true. Sometimes an intervention does need to be drastic. And,
Absolutely.
and I think that's okay. And that's like, as a parent, I think you have to think, okay, so you can see signs and symptoms, right? Like more isolation and alienation. They've stopped doing things they used to enjoy. Um, they're spending more time alone. What other signs are there? Give us some signs like that when they say, I just don't think life's worth living, or they say, something, you should know to take this seriously.
Now I'm gonna find the. So my little handout that I'm going to send has warning signs and an emotional scale and just all kinds of things, and that, and like I say, they can pick it up off the website, and that. So this is literally what the questions are that are on the form, that when you're at, if you're answering hotlines, you pick up the piece of paper and these are the things that you have to write down and the questions that you have to ask. So you need to know, one, if they're calling a hotline, they're definitely thinking about suicide. But even if you're just intervening, and that it's like, do they have a plan? And have they made some type of a decision that this is what they're going to do? How? What is the plan? When? The time frame is huge. The how is huge. And where? And then, and do they have the means? Now, it's like, there was this one young man who had lost a friend to suicide, and he said he wanted to end his life, but he needed a bullet for his gun. Yeah, yeah. That's a little too easy. You don't want someone who only needs a bullet
Right.
for their gun, But if they have, so if they have a plan, what you're trying to find out is, how long do I have to do something?
Right.
And that, can I let them off the phone, or do I need to get them to the hospital?
So,
We're
right.
somewhere
They answer,
here,
they
or
two
we're
of
there.
those questions. They've
Mhm.
put some planning. Is that kind of the parameters, like two or more questions? Where does that put them?
Right. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. If they answer these, in a sense that they actually have like an answer explaining what they're going to do, and it has to do with suicide, then that's when you need to like step in. That's when those little antennas, they go up and go, oh my God, okay,
So
this is really serious.
in terms of a child like threatening suicide, and maybe they're doing it out of that whole thing if they want some attention or whatever, how should a parent respond? If you had, a magic wand and you could get a parent to respond exactly the right way, how would that parent respond to that child's pain? Because that child is expressing pain to you when they do that.
It would be for the parent to be able to sit with them and answer any questions that they have, to assure them that, maybe the situation is bad, and to assure them that, yes, this isn't a good thing that we're doing right now. We're not, things aren't going really good for us right now, but let's figure out how we can work together, and that to be a team to work on getting through it. And that, um, the kind of the how, the when, and the where are critical, because the how will tell you, do they have access to something that they could end their life with? In some manner, we all have access to something.
Yes.
Yeah. So, but what is it? And whatever it is, yes, I have access to a gun. Am I going to shoot myself? That's, so that's kind of like a high flag. The where is important. Both of us having lived in San Francisco, the Golden Gate Bridge, which is just, the energy just driving across
Yeah.
that bridge, and that energy is so extraordinary. That, but people go there, they go for a destination suicide,
Yes.
and so, I'm going to jump off the bridge. Kevin Hines, and that, who wrote the book and goes around and does tours, lived in San Francisco, and he said that on his way to the bridge, it was in his mind, and that if anybody stops me and says anything to me or talks to me or asks me how I am, I'm not going to do it. Nobody did. He got to the bridge, he looked at it, decided he was going to jump. He had made other attempts before, And as he says, as his hand left the rail when he was on the other side of it, he realized he didn't want to die. Now, mostly pretty much too late, but he managed to turn his body around so that he entered the water feet first.
Oh my goodness.
Because
And he survived.
yeah, and he broke his legs and everything in
I think
multiple
this is
places.
so important. I really honestly believe that there comes that point where you do it. You pull that trigger.
Yeah.
The train is ready to smack you and there's no way off the tracks, whatever it is. And
Mhm.
that moment of clarity that, oh my gosh, what am I doing? I truly
Yeah.
believe that in my heart of hearts, that
Yes.
every victim of suicide would have changed their mind if they could have. And I do want to say that, I'm reading this book about addiction and I'll link the title. And this man says that that suicide to an addict is really homicide because he understands that you are not the disease.
Mhm.
You are not that voice in your head telling you to do this. Is a disease. This is a brain illness.
Right.
That's
And the body is just happening to go with it.
right. And you think it talks to you in your same voice. So you think this is you, but it isn't. It is not you. You are not responsible for this voice. And it is your enemy.
Mhm.
And I do truly believe that. So I'm so glad you brought that up. And I call it my San Francisco room. You've seen it because that's where I usually am when we're in classes together. And I've got an entryway painting of the San Francisco uh, Golden Gate Bridge. And I love it because as a San Franciscan, that's your vision of it. Like when you're entering onto it. And so it's literally, on the road, getting onto the bridge. And so many people kind of romanticize the bridge and they do the sideways views and they do this and that. And really, I mean, to a San Franciscan, it's like there's something about crossing that bridge,
Mhm.
like you said, it's a very magical feeling. And I've always had, because I was brought up, learning about California history, and there are actually people that it cost them their life to build that bridge, and they are literally, that is their cemetery. They're buried in the cement of those pilings that are holding up that bridge. And so there's a healthy respect for that. But that is just, I mean, honestly, I think that's a good place to end, but I do think we have so much more to talk about. And I think, we're going to be opening up Sugar X Global. It's going to be a village, really, of
Ooh,
a place for people to get help and get connection, because connection is vital to your
it is.
mental health.
Mhm.
And it is, you said something about, go three parents over. Well, I'm so lucky because my daughter Lisa has like two other mothers, three
Right.
actually. And a couple of them are women that I go to church with, and two of the kids are two of her best friends. And then another one, her best friend Bennett, uh, his mother Lisa loves my Lisa. And so she can talk to these women. It doesn't make me jealous, it makes me thrilled. If something happened to me, she would have other women who love her and care about her and want the best for her in her life. And this is a wonderful thing to have in this day and age. And I'm so grateful for that. And I wish I could help other people to form these kinds of communities and alliances, whether you agree with politics, with if someone is willing to fully embrace and love your child and love their quirkiness the way you do, and accept them and allow them to express themselves. I think it's really important for people to be able to express themselves honestly and not have a filter on it. And I think that's something, I'm having such an age difference in my kids that I'm so much better at, at this stage in my life. And
Uh-huh.
if I could reassure young parents of anything, it's when your kid throws a fit, it's not your fault. Kids throw fits.
Right.
If your kid, does something embarrassing, it's not your fault. Kids do embarrassing things. Just just let them be them. They aren't you. Let them have their own quirky personality. My friend Samantha Hubbard, she talks about this all the time. She's like got tons of followers on TikTok, she's the middle of nowhere mom, and she's kind of like the TikTok mom. And all
Uh,
these kids can come to her and ask her questions, and she
yeah.
faces their reality. She doesn't shrink from it.
Mhm.
And I think, our own fear as parents sometimes stifles our children, you
Yeah.
know? And so I encourage you to just open up those lines of communication and put yourself in the back seat and put your child in the front seat and let them drive the relationship a little bit, you
Mhm.
know, and have a more respectful communication with your kids, especially now. What are the current suicide rates? How have they increased with
Oh,
COVID?
I don't have numbers, but it's terrible. And it's really terrible. Yeah. And for all the same reasons. For, you just take that list
They're
and
magnified with the
check it,
loneliness.
just check it off. It's a hard time. Families are losing jobs, they're losing their homes. They don't have the same connection with school. I mean, I normally teach, the few classes that I teach are normally in the classroom, and that I'm, discombobulated, whatever, and that teaching online. Uh, but I've always maintained I can tell Sandy anything and she'll make sure that I get the right help, and that whatever it is, and that's something I've always valued and treasured, are those relationships. And I mean, I've been asked to, like, one young girl who was in my peer counseling program at a school in Half Moon Bay. um, when it was time for her to go to college, her mother and I drove her to college. And this was a mother that appreciated my relationship with the daughter. And actually, that's something I really, really, really want to say and plug, is peer counseling programs for students. And that middle school and high school need that. These kids can get trained. They're the first ones to know if one of their friends is having a problem, whatever it is. And they're the first ones who can get in line to get them to the right resources.
And I think kids, when they are given that kind of a responsibility, they rise to the occasion.
Oh,
I
they're
think part of
amazing.
our problem with our society is we discount kids' ability to uh,
Yeah.
have an impact. And when a child has a purpose that's greater than them, this is a reason to live. This is where self-esteem comes from. Self-esteem comes from being allowed to do esteemable things,
Exactly.
and so making a difference in someone's life, that's a hugely powerful, motivating tool for being your best and taking care of yourself, because other people are counting on you, you know, and that is part of the give and take of life. And so I think you're incredibly 100% right about that. Kids need to be in charge of some things. I think about, I went to Nathaniel Bowditch Middle School in Foster City. And I think I read in history that Bowditch was a 14-year-old captain of a ship
Mm,
in the 1700s or 1800s. 14 years old, and he was the captain of a
mm,
ship, because back then there's no such thing as being a teenager. You were ready for responsibilities and rites of passage. And I think
mm.
that we kind of need to go back to that a little bit. We need to let our kids know that we're confident in a lot of their abilities, and if they need us, we're on the sidelines ready to step in and give them some direction if they need it.
Yes.
We believe you can sail your ship. They need belief, and they need praise. They need to hear you say, I'm really proud of the way you handled that situation. Not that grade, not that this and that. That's going to help rewire their brain to fire together for positive things. Wow, I got a verbal reward from my mom and dad because this situation happened at school and this girl got pregnant, and I didn't gossip, and I said that I was concerned about her, and I wondered out loud, what could I do to help her not feel ostracized, or whatever it is. My daughter's very compassionate, and she's very like that. So I'm giving you kind of some real examples of who my daughter is, and I'm proud of who she is. and,
That's
and
one.
that's different than what someone does, because sometimes you're going to ace that test and sometimes you're going to fail that test, but that's not who you are.
Mhm. And within the schools, and the reason that I like to see these peer counseling programs get moving, and that is the kids turn to each other first, and then if the person that they turn to can identify the trusted adult that they can tell anything to, and that then you have something.
Yes.
Yeah. If you don't have that adult on campus that you can't tell things to, like the high school that I teach the college class for, is part of the college, and that so it's like a charter high school, a couple hundred kids on the college's campus, and they have the most wonderful principal and school counselor. And so one day, one of the students calls me from school, and she says, I'm having this problem and this is what's happening and everything else. And, so I always make sure they always have my number. And that, so I said, okay, where are you physically on campus? And that, let's go, to the school counselor's office, because I know that she's trusted adult, on campus. And and the principal and the school counselor are the best in the world. I mean, I'm telling you, if every school had this principal and this school counselor, we would not have half of the problems that we have. um, and so basically she gets to the school counselor's office and the door is closed, she's got somebody in there. So we keep talking, and we're just talking how I'm assessing and everything. And so I said, and then finally the door opens. So she, went into the school counselor. I said, okay, now just hand her the phone, hand her the phone and sit down. And so I told the school counselor, here's what's happening, blah, blah, blah. I'm, okay, it's yours now. And that. And so, she was able to get the help that she wanted. She needed to go home that day. And then the school counselor got the mother, had her come and get her, took care of her. And it was like the minute I was able to hand her off to the school counselor and, tell her what was going on. And then, I mean, I had a network. I had a network of trusted adults that I could, say, this is, who you can go to. This is what a trusted adult looks like.
Right.
It's so important. We need
It
that.
is important. And I look forward to having, many more conversations with you. And I hope that you'll join us on an expert panel when we do have our community, because we want to have, Zoom conversations that people can come in on, where you speak for maybe 10 minutes on suicide, and then open the floor to a question and answer period, so that people can have some interaction with an expert that they might not otherwise have access to, because we really feel that an educated person can make such better decisions for themselves, because addiction is 10% is the thing, right? So it's the gambling, the sex, the food, the drugs, the alcohol, whatever, the porn. Once you stop that, 40% is brain repair. It's biochemical repair. And a lot of this comes through new thinking and new ideas, and education can help you think, I didn't know that. So now you know better. So now you can do better, because you can't do better if you don't know better. There's no way to do that. You don't have a solution. And so we want to provide that 40%, as well as then having connection, having a community. That's the 50%. And in this community, our members will be able to reach out to each other and form their own micro communities in real life that have nothing to do with us. And that's a huge asset. You can't do that on Facebook. You can't do that on some of these other platforms. So I think what we're bringing together is so incredibly healing and therapeutic. And there's nothing like one person helping another person and getting intimately involved in somebody's life. And it's just such a wonderful opportunity to have people like you with such valuable insight and an obvious love of teens and their mental health, and what you do. And I think you're just an amazing woman, and I appreciate your time, Sande. Thank you so much.
Oh, it was a pleasure.